It is my pleasure to introduce Amy Rubino for this is our last session, right? Yes. So Amy's at Under Armour, Baltimore. Baltimore proud, protect this house or whatever. Is that the ad campaign? I see it driving by. I'm very athletic, as you can tell. Six-pack became a keg. So Amy is not unlike our opening keynote. Abby sort of started visual design before moving into user experience and user experience design. So there's some interesting similarities there. As I mentioned, she is at, oh my God, Under Armour. And is the manager of UX Insights there. Amy has a master's of interaction design and information architecture from the University of Baltimore. She's also a professor at MICA. We're going to have a great MICA giveaway after her presentation, something that you will definitely all want to stick around for. She also co-hosts the Baltimore UX Meetup. So clearly Amy is someone who is very engaged in the community, especially in the Baltimore area, and we're thrilled to have her inside the Beltway helping us out and presenting today. So I'll turn it over to Amy.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay, awesome. I'm going to skip this slide. So today I'm going to talk about finding your UX maturity level. So I'm approaching today's theme of information strategy and structure from a slightly different angle. I'm going to be talking about how an organization's strategy and structure towards user experience impacts the day-to-day of UX professionals like ourselves. So as he mentioned, I work at Under Armour, and I focus on trying to understand the needs, behaviors, and motivations of the customers that shop our sites. But over the last 10 years, I've held a variety of other roles in the field of UX, from being a UX team of 1 to one of 30 UX designers, and from entering the field as an entry-level UX designer to managing a team. So I've seen a lot of different things. And with each of those roles, there were opportunities and challenges. I started to realize, though, that those opportunities and challenges were somewhat influenced by the organization's relationship to UX and how well they understood their users and tried to meet their users' needs, essentially their UX maturity level. So I want to share with you some of the things I've learned along the way, because even though there may be more opportunities in UX and IA than there are people like us to fill those roles, I understand not every organization fully embraces users and understands what we do. So there's one thing I want you to take away from this talk. Every organization fits within a spectrum of UX maturity levels, and there's a level that's right for you. So what I'm going to cover is I'll introduce the concept of UX maturity, and I'll share some UX maturity models that I've explored. Then I'll talk about how this UX maturity applies to you and share some opportunities and challenges I've faced, and also share some ideas on how you can move to a different UX level. So before I go any further, I want to learn a little bit about you guys. Who out there is interested in UX or IA but hasn't gotten into the field yet? Okay, we got a few people. Awesome. Who's a practicing information architect or content strategist or UX designer? Okay, great. We got a good mix. So a question for all of you. Who's happy with how much your organization really invests in understanding and meeting the needs of your users? Okay, got a little bit. Who feels or who wishes that their organization would do more to really understand users and meet their needs? Yeah. So look around the room. You're not the only one facing that challenge. I think it's good to remember that there's some things we all have to get through together. So I've mentioned the term UX maturity, but what exactly is that? I like this quote by Jacob Nielsen, and Nielsen is principal of Nielsen Norman Group, and he's known for really spurring the discount usability testing movement. And he said, typically organizations progress through a sequence of stages as their UX processes evolve and mature. So he proposed this model in 2006 based on all the organizations he observed moving through various stages of really understanding and starting to really appreciate and act on the needs of its users. But Nielsen is just one perspective on this. If you take a look at this slide, this is a screenshot of just a few of the UX maturity models that exist. And taking a look at these maturity models, I found that there's one thing that's common across all of them. There are several steps between your organization having little or no awareness for users to the organization really having a culture that revolves around meeting user needs. And I probably don't have to sell the idea of understanding users and meeting their needs to you guys, but I think it's worth mentioning that when we really meet our users' needs, we have happier users, more high-value users, more loyal users, and users are going to help get the word out and talk about our brand. So I'm going to share some examples in a few minutes, but I think it's important to remember that many organizations actually start out on the lower levels of UX maturity. It takes time to kind of progress through those stages. Newer organizations tend to start out at a higher level, but that's not always the case. So I want to talk about some of the models I looked at to figure out a framework for this conversation, because I feel like there's a connection between an organization's UX maturity and the day-to-day experiences of professionals like ourselves who are focusing on UX. So we'll look at the usability maturity model by Jonathan Erthy, 5 stages of experience-based differentiation maturity by Bruce Temkin, and corporate UX maturity stages by Jacob Nielsen. So the usability maturity model by Jonathan Erthy was created in 1998. So this is probably one of the first examples of a UX maturity model. Erthy is Principal Human Factor Specialist for Lloyd's Register, and he was really influenced by similar models for software development and quality assurance. His approach is very structured. It's treated almost as a checklist, and he even created an ISO standard for instituting user-centered approaches to software lifecycles. This model has 6 levels. It starts at the top with level X, where UX is unrecognized. And then the organization progresses through the stages of UX being recognized, considered, implemented, integrated, and institutionalized. So this model is really based on the team as they understand the value of users and how they can drive the business forward. They start to collect user requirements, follow user-centered design approach, and eventually create a culture that's driven by users. So I thought this was a really great example, but since it really focuses on the engineering team and the changes they make, it wasn't as holistic of an approach of thinking across the organization. So I continued to explore models. I took a look at Bruce Temkin's 5 stages of experience-based differentiation maturity. So Temkin was working at Forrester Research at the time, and he's known for creating Forrester's Customer Experience Index. His model was based on several years of research, including surveying close to 300 companies. So this model starts at the bottom with stage 1, where the organization is interested in customer experience or user experience. And then the stages progress to invested, committed, engaged, and finally embedded, where the organization has a culture that really is influenced by users. So similar to the other model, as the organization kind of understands that value of users, they continue to invest and create more formalized processes. Something I like about this model is that Temkin put some numbers behind it. He interviewed 300 organizations, and of those he spoke to, 37% were not yet at that first stage of maturity. So basically, 37% had no known UX activity. 41% were in those first 2 stages. So they were somewhat interested or invested in UX, but it wasn't really a commitment across the organization. Only 4% were at stage 5, where the organization has user experience really embedded in their processes. So I know this is from 2008, so it might seem a little dated, but over the years, Temkin has continued to put out similar research, and unfortunately, these numbers haven't changed much. So I think it's safe to say that it's still, in many organizations, it's a work in progress in getting them to really understand the value of what we do. So something I liked about this model is it was more holistic than the first one, but I do think it's really missing that key initial stage where UX is unrecognized. Because I'm sure there's some other people in this room besides myself who has tried to initiate UX efforts before anyone was really ready to hear us speak up and understand what we were doing. So I continued to look at models, and I came across the corporate UX maturity model by Jacob Nielsen. For me, this was the one that most resonated with my experience. Is anyone here familiar with this model? Okay, at least one person, awesome. So I'm going to take a closer look at the stages of this model. So starting on the left with stage 1, we have hostility towards usability. So this is that initial stage I just mentioned where no one in the organization is really ready to hear about users and their needs. So if you're trying to get some traction for user research or UX activities, it's going to be really tough at this point. Stage 2, developer-centered user experience, is where organization starts to realize that there's value in usability, but they're not actually talking to users yet. They're just kind of using their best guesses and trying to be thinking from the user's perspective. Stage 3 is Skunkworks user experience, and I think this is the coolest name of all the stages I've explored. If you're not familiar with Skunkworks, it's a project led by people primarily for the sake of radical innovation. And Nielsen calls this skunkworks because this is when small pockets of people across the organization start to really initiate some UX efforts. So you've got some user advocates that are across the organization. Stage 4, dedicated UX budget, is exactly that. So at that point, there's actually some money dedicated to UX activities, and those activities start to be planned for the same way other processes across the organization are done. So back on the left, we have stage 5, manage usability. So this is a big win at this point because there's finally a UX team dedicated to user-centered design, and that's led by a manager who's in charge of UX and usability across the organization. Stage 6, systematic user-centered design process. This is when processes start to be in place for tracking the user experience across releases, and usability is no longer brought in at the last minute. Stage 7, integrated user-centered design. At this point, the organization begins to employ usability data to really determine what it's going to build. So each step of the development lifecycle is infused with user data. Stage 8, user-driven incorporation. This is when the company starts to employ user research to determine its overall direction and priorities. So at this point, the concept of total user experience is extended beyond the screen. It goes into all forms of customer interactions across the organization. So I know I just kind of briefly went through a couple of models, but what do you think really influences an organization's UX maturity level? Can I get you guys to suggest some things? Stakeholders? Crisis? Yeah.
How old the company is?
Yeah. Age of company?
Perceived benefit.
Perceived benefit? Yeah. Those are all great. I think another key one is time. Experts say it can take a few years to a few decades for an organization to move to the next UX maturity level. So a few years to a few decades is a long time. And basically it's because this is a bit of a cultural change. So cultural change doesn't happen overnight. And I think it's important then for people like us who are working in the field to realize that we really just need to embrace opportunities at all the different levels. We're not all going to be able to get a job in an organization with high UX maturity. So how can you tell which UX maturity level is right for you? I want to introduce the UX maturity spectrum. So using Nielsen's corporate UX maturity model as a base, I've layered on a spectrum that focuses on the experience of UX professionals. So starting on the left, we have stages 1, 2, and 3. And I've grouped those into low UX maturity. What's constant across these three is that you are going to be driving UX. Stages 4, 5, and 6 are middle UX maturity. You're going to have a little bit more backing at this point and some leadership support, so you and leadership will drive UX. Stages 7 and 8 are high UX maturity. At this point, the organization is driven by UX. So I think it's important to call out at this point that there's no good or bad UX maturity level. As I mentioned before, there's going to be openings in organizations across the spectrum. I think it's just a matter of finding the organization that really resonates with your way of working, whether you want to be more scrappy or less scrappy. And I'll be talking about that in just a moment. So I want to share from my experience the opportunities and challenges of these three levels. So starting with low UX maturity, when you're driving UX, you'll have an opportunity to experiment. So the nice thing here is that you can be a bit of a trailblazer. There's not much established at this point. So for example, in one of my first jobs, I just started showing up at meetings with wireframes. And no one had heard of wireframes before that. So there really were no expectations on how they should look and function. So that gave me an opportunity to try different tools, granted free tools because I had no budget, but I could try different tools to figure out what worked best in what context. You also have an ability to create standards and processes because there's not really going to be a user-centered design process at this point. You're probably one of the first or only people practicing UX at this organization. So we're all kind of problem solvers. So you put on that IA hat and you find a way to kind of make things more efficient and better. And in this environment, I definitely encourage you to work collaboratively with other teams. You might find it's going to be tough at times because people aren't going to understand what you do or may not really be thinking from the user's perspective. But you also are going to have those times where people aren't going to understand what you're going to do, and they're going to give you space to be the expert and work independently and potentially under the radar. Now, when it comes to low UX maturity challenges, I think one of the biggest things is you'll find you'll need to invite yourself to meetings. People are not going to have you top of mind when they're starting to kick off projects or even partway through projects. So it's really on you to, like Sheryl Sandberg says, lean in, speak up, be proactive, find a way to have a seat at the table and be part of those conversations. Another thing you'll find value in doing is educating others. Educating them on what you do and the value you bring and about your users. So I like how Abby mentioned earlier, having kind of those coffee talks. I think that's a great way of having some one-on-one conversations with people, find out what success means for their team, and try to spin it on how you can help their team to be successful. I also think there's value in adding a few slides to your presentations or hosting lunch and learns, ways to get the word out. And as you talk to more people, you'll find that you have some advocates, and hopefully they will help start inviting you to those meetings and conversations you need to be part of. I think one of the biggest challenges at this level is working around budget constraints. So as I mentioned earlier, scrappy. I call myself scrappy when I operate this level. Sometimes people say guerrilla UX. You're going to really try to use free tools and resources, rely on your friends and family to do usability testing for free. So you just find a way to get things done, and it's going to help you to become a stronger problem solver. Another challenge at this level is that you may have a boss who just doesn't really even understand what you do. So especially when you're new in the field, I know it can be really hard to seek out validation and some help and guidance. So events like today are really great to network with other UX professionals, find a mentor, just even find some friends to help you along the way. We're a friendly bunch, so. But as I mentioned, it might be tough to find mentorship in your organization, but it doesn't mean you can't find that elsewhere. So a former colleague of mine, Willie Stewart, is a senior human factors scientist, and he works at the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab. And I asked Willie what he likes most when he's worked in environments where they have low UX maturity. And he said, I enjoy the challenge of working with individuals who thought of UX as a luxury, but later advocated for our involvement. So Willie has had great success in starting to educate people who are not familiar with the team's value and having them really step up and bring them into conversations. So I want to ask you guys, who works at an organization with low UX maturity right now? Got a few hands. Does anyone share what they like about working at that level?
I guess some of what you were saying was true, where since it hasn't really been done before, you have the ability to set the standard and educate people about it, but then it could be on your own.
Yeah. Oh, great. Anyone else want to share something? Okay, cool. So moving on to middle UX maturity. So at this level, you and leadership are going to drive UX. So you have some buy-in across the organization. There's going to be people who understand what you do beyond people who have UX in their title, and that's great. That really gives you an advantage of having more people you can brainstorm and collaborate with who can be user-focused. You also have some more defined standards and processes, so you're going to be able to operate a little bit more efficiently and kind of have a framework. Hopefully you're even kind of brought into projects, but you're still going to have that opportunity to refine and tweak things because things aren't going to be as solidified. And at this level, you're going to have access to a budget, which is great. So it might not be as comprehensive as you like, but you'll have the ability to get like a legit wireframing tool license. You can start compensating users when you do usability testing. So there's some benefit to that. I see two challenges at the middle UX maturity level. I found that you still need to speak up to be involved in conversation. So you may be brought into projects, but at the last minute or partway through, and you need to start to kind of get the word out that your value is really being involved earlier on and throughout the project lifecycle. And also, it'll help to start educating people because they may understand what UX design is, but they may not realize that even actually means talking to users and validating ideas for users and building that research into your product timelines and budgets. And they may not really always understand all the skills that you can bring to the table, that you could do a site on it or build a taxonomy or really solve any kind of difficult problem. So some of those same tricks for educating is continuing to have like one-on-one conversations and maybe hosting lunch and learns, but you could even think bigger and like what Chief's doing today, host UX events at your organization and encourage teammates across different disciplines to join, or maybe even start a book club where you talk about different things like agile and design thinking and user research. And I know some of these suggestions are things that are going to require you to do like extra work above and beyond what you currently do, but you'll find that these could really go a long way in making your day-to-day easier. So Catherine Robertson is another colleague of mine, and she's a user experience manager at Mantech International. She shared with me that her company in just the last year moved from low UX maturity to the high end of middle UX maturity. And so I think this is a really great example of an organization moving more quickly than most. So it kind of gives us hope that things can evolve quickly. And she said, it never would have happened without an executive champion who has my back 100% when I'm experimenting and talking my way into meetings and established processes. So she had that executive champion who was, really speaking up for the team and advocating for them, which is great. She also mentioned that their biggest federal contract has started requiring UX in their proposals. And a lot of federal agencies are requiring Agile in their IT contracts. And with user feedback being a main tenet of Agile, they've been able to retool their processes and making sure they're talking to users. And I think it's interesting that she likes operating at this more mature level, but sometimes it's hard to let go of those guerrilla UX instincts. Who out here works for middle UX? Okay. Got a couple of hands. Anyone want to share what they like about that level?
It's still new and shiny.
New and shiny?
Cool.
Yeah.
People are still like, oh, what's that? What's that? Just makes you feel good about what you do.
Yeah, that's great. Moving on to high UX maturity. So high UX maturity is the point when the organization is really driven by the user. So everyone understands the value you bring. You have access to people and teams that are, kind of on the same page and helping you to be more user focused. You're also going to have more established standards and processes. And again, this helps you to be more efficient. I know I worked at an organization where not only did they have a style guide, but their style guide elements were built into their wireframing tool. They had really great templates for user research. So it helped me to be more efficient in my day-to-day, but it also helped our team to be more polished when we presented to leaders and peers. You also have access to a more comprehensive budget at this point. So not only will you have resources and tools, but you will also potentially be able to bring in outside experts when you need to expand on your UX expertise. And probably the most exciting part of this level is that UX is part of the discovery, design, and development of most everything. So this really opens up the scope of projects that you get to work on because the value is seen in your ability to solve any kind of interesting problem and customer touch point. So I think organizations with high UX maturity level can be really amazing places to work, especially when your role is to be the user advocate, but they're not without their drawbacks. I think these organizations can be very forward-thinking and experiment, but because they have more established processes, you might find it harder to do those kind of guerrilla things like doing a usability test in a coffee shop or man-on-the-street interviews because things are a little bit more formalized. And also in this environment, your teams are going to be larger, so you'll likely get to partner with one or more UX designers or information architects, and that's really great. If you have some good synergy, you know you're going to be making stronger products. But if you want to feel a sense of autonomy and ownership, it's kind of hard to feel that in this environment. So Leslie Humphreys, who's sitting back there, you guys might have heard her speak a little earlier today. She's an interaction designer and information architect at Design for Context. And her experience in the field has mostly been in consulting. So she primarily works with organizations that are middle or high UX maturity. And when I asked her about her role, she said, as part of consultancy that focuses on solving complex problems, I get to work on a variety of interesting projects. The variety is one of the things I most enjoy about my role. So you should definitely talk to Leslie about some of the cool projects she gets to work on. And like I said, it's at higher level, the understanding of the value you can bring to all different types of things is great at this level. So is there anyone out there besides Leslie who works in an organization with high UX maturity? Yeah? Yeah.
Well, I work at a consultancy, so internally we have very high UX maturity level, but sometimes our clients are not exactly where we are. So it's an interesting opportunity to kind of cross all of those boundaries with that organizational support.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you. So now that we've talked about this a little bit, hopefully you understand that there's pros and cons at each UX maturity level, and hopefully you kind of understand what you're most drawn to. Who feels like they're at the right UX maturity level right now? Okay, got a few hands. Who feels like they'd maybe like to make a change, whether they want to go lower or higher? Okay, a few tentative hands. Well, for those of you who are looking to move to a different UX maturity level, I'd like to share some recommendations. I encourage you to network. Events like today are really great for getting to know other people in the field and also people in other positions. So not only does it kind of give you a forum for getting advice, but you get to have a pulse on what other people are doing, what other organizations are doing. And when you're ready for a change, who you know can be a really valuable asset. Find a mentor. It's always great to have a trusted advisor on your side who can help you figure out how to navigate some of the challenging things in your current office or how to move to that next opportunity. And if you can, find a sponsor. The difference between a mentor and a sponsor is a mentor is someone who has a little bit more experience than you do. They could be in your office or another office. But your sponsor is someone who works at your company and is at the higher level. So they have a seat at decision-making tables, and they can really bring visibility to what you do. And if you're interested in moving to a higher UX maturity level, think about what you can do to really take your organization there. Take some small steps, knowing that it could take time, but you might be surprised what kind of impact you make. And if, like in Catherine's situation, you have that executive sponsor who has your back, that might move things along quicker than you expect. And if all else fails, explore other jobs. I think sometimes we just need a fresh start, and that's a great way to get a fresh start. But I would encourage you before you make that move to figure out what UX maturity level do you want to move into, and make sure you ask questions that get you the answers. Find out how high up there is leadership supports UX. Find out about their budget. Ask the questions that are going to help you to really understand the environment you're going to jump into. And I have one more recommendation for you today. I want to encourage you to make your own opportunities. A few years back, I was struggling in a role where I felt I was a bit stifled. I wasn't really getting to use all the skills I hoped to use. And I was starting to consider looking for another job. And I spoke to a leader in the UX community, and he told me that it's easier to start something new where you are than at a new position. And he explained, you know the company culture, you know the players, you have a relationship with your boss, and potentially can negotiate your responsibilities. So I took that up to heart, and that's something I recommend to a lot of people, is if you want to try something new, be proactive and make that happen where you are. Thank you. Are there any questions?
if you're trying to move your organization from low to middle, or even higher up in the middle level, I guess, besides yourself, just introducing more things and advancing, like, what do you think is the value of having other people, champion this besides maybe like the boss or supervisor or something? Or how can they help you like standardize things so it becomes more the norm than exception?
Yeah, I think getting to know who your advocates are across the organization are great. People like product managers and project managers that could help make sure things are built into your timelines, but really working any connections you can.
So it occurs to me that this model, and I apologize because I was in and out a little because I'm doing backroom stuff, but that the model can be applied some other ways as well. So for instance, if you're in a middle or a more mature company that is a service provider, a UX service provider, for instance, you can sort of do the experimental, behind the scenes, backing into UX, lower level maturity level work with a client that's at that level, even though perhaps your practice is at a higher level. Do you have any experience with that you might want to share?
I don't, but that's a really great point. So you might be consulting on a project with a client where you have the opportunity to do those kind of more experimental things. Yeah, I think that's a great point.
You mentioned that there may be situations where you would want to go from high lower to another organization. Can you talk about how that might be appealing to somebody who already works in a high maturity UX situation that would be interested in exploring lower
Sure.
levels?
Yeah, I see sometimes maybe someone at a higher level might want to move into like a manager or director role at an organization that has no user experience practice. Like you want to be the first one in and kind of champion and build the framework. So I think, yeah, if you feel like taking that on, someone might want to do that, kind of go down a level.
What level would you recommend for someone just starting out or trying to get into the field?
I think no matter what your experience is, you could have success at any of the levels. I do find that I was someone who I entered and I was a UX team of one and I was the only UX designer. And at that time, it was kind of overwhelming. Looking back now, I feel like, I feel more equipped and I could, if I wanted to go back, in time, would probably enjoy that experience a little bit more. So you might want to just find an environment where you feel like you're going to have some internal mentorship and support. Because if you're completely new, it might help to have a little bit of a framework there to get going.
Yeah, I will say I was in the same shoes as I was in the same shoes as I was new and went in and I was the only designer and it was challenging. And I'm now at a company that's more at mid-level and I have more resources to learn from, and it is really helpful just to learn and grow from, even if it's just for a little while. But
yeah,
it's really helpful to have other resources there. Yeah.
And just to piggyback on that, don't ever think at whatever stage you're in your career that it's too late to have a mentor, because a colleague of Amy's and mine, I think she was a consultant for quite a long time. So she was, presumably she was at a high level. She was going in and giving her expertise on a consultant basis. And then she went in-house for the first time. And I think she knew that there were going to be some real differences there. So she got a mentor, but she'd already been in the field for I would say probably more than a decade, possibly multiple decades. But I think that really helped her to go in-house at a larger organization and learn how to negotiate those politics and how to effectively, work internally that way.
Great point.
So what sparked your interest to start to look at this? Because this is something I've definitely thought of as I've gotten different jobs in UX and kind of thinking about what kind of organization do I want to be at? Do I want to help set up the practices as I have several years of experience now, or do I want to work somewhere that's open to me setting those up? But kind of how did you get into thinking about this and like researching it?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I never heard of it. So
I think it kind of spurred from, I was just kind of, my role had kind of evolved recently, and I was just like thinking about what I enjoyed most about previous roles, because I'm helping to kind of shape my current role. So I went back and I wrote the kind of the pros and cons of all of them, and I started to see kind of some patterns. And then when I actually first saw Nielsen's corporate UX maturity model, and then went back and dug into other ones. But that started to make me see those patterns across the different jobs I'd had.
so how's it helping you now?
I think it's just more on my radar of understanding like where my organization currently is, and understanding those opportunities and challenges. And I think anywhere you work, you want to continue to evolve things, but it also made me realize it takes time, and sometimes I'm not as patient as I should be. So. Anything else? Okay.
We have more time if you want to be extemporaneous at all, but you can also like get a head start on.
I don't want to stand.
Hear the beer. I think what's going on here.
It's all Sunday.
I don't want to stand between happy hour. Yeah. Sure. So for a couple years, I was part of a UX design team that supported e-commerce. And we were supporting the customers of our North American site, and then eventually we were supporting all of our international sites. So that was like about 30 websites around the world. And recently, me and another teammate and I were spun off into a separate customer research and strategy role. So there's still the user experience design team that's coming up with concepts and doing usability tests, but we're trying to get ahead of things. We move very fast at Under Armour. We really just jump into, this is like what we need to do, not always taking the time to understand the customer needs and the problem we're solving. So that's what my teammate and I are hoping to do. One of the big things we're doing right now is creating personas. Anything else?
Is the goal always to move the org up, or is there a point where the org might actually be operating best at, say, 6 rather than 10?
That's a really great question. I guess it's kind of like whose perspective. Maybe from the user's perspective, it's always better if it's higher, but if that causes some internal challenges, then like you're saying, maybe just hanging out at 6 or 8 is better. Or sorry, 6 is better. I'm not sure if I know how to answer that. Yeah, I think like I feel like I'd always want to keep making it, like infusing more things with user, but as a UX professional, like that's my perspective.
Sort of piggybacking on that, I would tend to say that for the individual employee, companies that are still on the upswing just in general probably present a bit more opportunity, even though if you're already at the top level, obviously, if you're elite at an organization that's already at a 9 or a 10, good for you.
And then you get bought by a bank.
All right. I don't know where Jeff went, but oh, okay.
Thank you very much, Amy.
Thank you.